So we spoke about denialism, and that is, you know, part and parcel with the whole ASC narrative. They have to, they deny any possible benefit or the 55 million words of spoken words and lectures that constitute Scientology philosophy. They have to deny that it exists in its entirety. And so their narrative can be summed up real simply as Scientology is a group of people who have no substance. There's no substance that they're trying to protect, and yet they do two things. If somebody breaks ranks and vociferously disagrees with the group, they're ostracized and they're disconnected from. Okay, and if the person then makes it their goal or their activity to then escalate that disagreement and turn it into an attack, Scientology then ruthlessly dispenses with the attacker, okay? And that, in essence, is the narrative that goes over and over and over. It's the basis of Going Clear. It's the basis of Aftermath. It's the basis of the blogs in the troll farm. And what I learned through 5 years of interacting with these people who are the center of the authors of the Bible of the ASC and the center of the hierarchy, the Troika cluster, is that literally that narrative that they tell is precisely a description of themselves. There is literally no philosophy. It is literally an anarchy of ideas. There's no solutions. There's no interconnecting sort of philosophy or way of looking at things. There is only ostracizing, marginalizing, and attacking Scientologists. It's us versus them, and that's the only basis upon which the group exists. Okay, so the Troika. I mentioned that the Troika of ASC considered that they had a well-defined, hard-bound hierarchy. The only problem with it is all three members of it think they're in charge. And what I mean by that is the three members, Tony Ortega, who runs a daily blog, he's their sort of PR meme guy. Mike Rinder, who runs a daily blog, and Leah Remini, who runs reality TV, spin-offs on Scientology. Every meme, every idea that emanates from the ASC emanates from those three. I mean, somebody may have an idea and bring it in, but it clears one of those three before it gets put out there. And they continue to churn this stuff out. And they only do it because it's profitable. Now, when I say they consider they have a hierarchy, I mean, I've had discussions with these people. Tony Ortega snickers about what a fool Mike Rinder and Leah Remini are, and how easy it is to sucker them into making him the only first scoop guy, so he gets all the quote-unquote scoops, right? Mike Rinder says that Leah Remini is just a ditzy, harebrained, privileged person, okay, who has a great overbloated self-image of herself, and that he has to guide her every step of the way and hold her hand. Leah Remini says that Mike Rinder and Tony Ortega are hallucinating if they don't realize that they're her bitches, and she's just using them. And so that's why I say that they're it's like a cluster, and they think they have a hierarchy, but each part of it thinks that they're the one that's in charge. But again, I say it always comes back to money. And Leah Remini explained it to me one day. She asked me if I got paid to participate in Going Clear, and I said, no, I never participate in, I never got paid for participating in a media or documentary, and I never would out of principle. And she said, I don't get that. I don't understand your thinking. She said, she said, I didn't participate because they wouldn't pay me. She said, I don't do anything unless I'm paid. Nothing. So at one point, Leah Remini told me she after 2 years of careful work through her publicists and Rinder and Ortega, had successfully come up with unlimited financial backing to go after Scientology, and she was in a creative production to do so. And she told me that she was so well backed that I could write my own ticket to participate as a producer. And so I asked her, what are you looking at producing? And she told me essentially it was going to be a regurgitation of everything that's been publicized about Scientology over the last 7 years, about things that have happened over the last 40 years, allegedly. And she would sort of resurrect the players who were saying things about Scientology 7 years as somehow new and current. To which my reaction was, I have no interest whatsoever. If you wanted to do something, and I've had this conversation over 2 years, if you want to do something that's educational, that is somewhat objective, that could lead to people getting on in life better, that gave some new perspective. That was the only basis upon which I ever told her I would ever participate in any of her stuff, right? I said, and that still stands. But what you're proposing is essentially a cheap tabloid-esque pile-on, and I'm not interested, okay? And I thought that would be the last I'd ever hear of her, because, I mean, that was the end of the conversation. She just, she was like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. It was like Ralph Cranton, and it was the end of the conversation. She had nothing to say, I think. And so I did think that would be the end of it. I told her what my position was, but it wasn't, but I'll get back to that, because I'm on this subject of financial motivation. Her partner, Mike Rinder, since he's left the Church of Scientology, has never had a job or never had an employment or never lifted a finger to do anything that wasn't related to anti-Scientology work that wasn't paid for by people that were interested in seeing Scientology's oxycord. And I know that because his first 3 or 4 engagements, he specifically asked me to help him get into a position where he could have such backers, and I put him in that position. And so from 2009, it's just been a series of sugar daddies for him, one right after the other. Venture capitalist, former trader. Well, actually, a number of people that are in that kind of business. An old woman with a ton of money who just is obsessed on the subject. It's just been one chain one after the other, and so in essence, he's followed the same philosophy as and now Leah Remini, who when I rejected her offer, she went straight to Mike Rinder, and he took her up happily. And then there's Tony Ortega, who's a third part of the troika, and Tony Ortega, at one point was really shining. It was really sort of sucking up to me, because I was sort of the attention of a lot of media, and he wanted to get his media cred. And he flew all the way down to South Texas to my home. And he had just got fired from the Village Voice, which he had sort of converted into this anti-Scientology platform for 2 years. And at a rare moment where he had a motive to be somewhat candid, he told me about the circumstances on which he left the Village Voice. And the circumstances, he said, you know, this can't go anywhere, but what happened is that the Village Voice had been accused, and in fact had been factually been investigated by law enforcement, of human trafficking and promoting the child sex slave industry by its back pages ads. And he told me that, you know, Scientology had been exposing that, and he said the problem is that Scientology was more accurate than anybody thought, and that in fact the Village Voice was almost exclusively financed by that human trafficking operation, and that there were profits beyond that. And so the owners, now that Scientology was exposing it and law enforcement was investigating it, decided they had to get rid of Tony Ortega because he was just obsessed with Scientology and he was keeping their focus on him and their operation. So they needed to get rid of him. And so in order to do that, they and to extract his cooperation in keeping quiet about what he knew, which is interesting because, of course, he's the first guy to accuse anybody who doesn't go after Scientology as being bought off, right? He literally agreed to cover it up and obstruct justice for a payout of essentially a 2-year buyout deal, where they paid him enough where he could literally do nothing for 2 years and go out and write a book on Scientology so that he could begin with some foundation of credibility upon which to continue his career, which he had turned into trashing Scientology. So with all three of the Troika, I've had personal experience that tells me the primary motivation is money.